The member for Gilmore will cease interjecting. I've received a letter from the honourable member for Greenway proposing that a definite matter of public importance be submitted to the House for discussion, namely the government's second-rate copper NBN. I call upon those honourable members who approve of the proposed discussion to rise in their places, and I call the honourable member for Greenway.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, few things better encapsulate the out-of-touch attitude of this Prime Minister in this government towards ordinary Australians than when it comes to the issue of broadband and their second-rate copper NBN. You only have to look at the answers in question time yesterday to appreciate the scale of just how far removed this Prime Minister is from the lived reality being experienced by consumers every day, from all age groups, from all walks of life, in every part of the country. Three themes have really come out from this government: the preference for spin before the lived experiences of consumers, peddling the fallacy that their NBN on their watch is on track and on budget, and continuing the blame game and the buck passing, and the failure to take responsibility even into their fifth year in government. Well, Mr Speaker, in stark contrast, those of us on this side of the House, we have been listening to consumers. When it comes to broadband as an essential utility, this out-of-touch government favours spin above the consumer experience. And we know that for consumers, businesses and the economy as a whole, how important it is to get world-class broadband to every part of the country. And just looking at every measure on which this government set itself, faster, sooner and more affordable, they have failed on every single count. The evidence is crystal clear. It was supposed to be delivered by 2016. As at the 31st of December, 7 million premises were still waiting. They promised they would deliver it for $29 billion, and it's blown out to $50 billion. And it's not faster. All you need to do is have a look at the level of complaints that are coming in at record scale from consumers right around Australia. And they talked a big game about how their second-rate version would be cheaper. And yesterday the Prime Minister tried to assert the same. But we've actually known since 2014, thanks to the minister at the table, that the claims that they made when they were in opposition about the cost of Labor's NBN were just wrong. We only need to look at the Herald of the 18th of February 2014, where the minister at the table admitted the coalition's claim, I'm quoting here from the Herald, that Labor's NBN would cost more than $90 billion, that it was plain wrong. When asked, and I quote, if the $90 billion estimate was then a political figure floated to win votes, Mr Fletcher admitted that figure was also wrong. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, you don't need to look very far to see the complete disregard this government has and how they've absolutely taken their out-of-touch approach to the next level. Have a look at the Prime Minister only days ago on radio when he was asked about the NBN, and the Prime Minister said, "I think we've got this in hand." Neil Mitchell, Prime Minister, the people tell me it is not in hand. Every time we raise it, the board is full of people complaining. We've got the cost blowout of $20 billion, a rollout schedule 3 years behind the promised delivery time, Australia slipping from 30th to 50th in the world in the international broadband rankings. We've had a 150% increase in TIO complaints about NBN faults. There has been, wait for this, a 1,075% blowout in the copper remediation bill to $640 million. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, those opposite will like to favour the spin. But those of us on this side know the sheer despair that is being felt by Australians for their inability to access broadband, and when they can access it, its unreliability, the fact that it simply doesn't perform to task. Just one story, we've all heard it, of students who simply can't download what they need for their schoolwork or for their tertiary education, where they park outside the public library just to get the free Wi-Fi, or go to McDonald's just to be able to access some broadband. And people understand this, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's something for which those opposite give very little credit, and that is that the consumers of Australia understand what they should be getting and what they would have been getting under Labor's superior model. People go around the world, and I get this all the time, people go around the world and they say, look, I was in a remote part of Cambodia and I had the best internet I have ever had compared to my own home. So completely oblivious to the lived experience of consumers, those opposite also purport to be the champions of small business, Mr Deputy Speaker, the champion of small business. Well, let's just have a look at what the Council of Small Business Australia had to say in July, saying its members are frustrated and shocked with slow connections and poor services under the NBN, with the problems causing many businesses to suffer substantial losses. And Peter Strong from Cosboa said what the public was told about the NBN was not the reality. When people think NBN, they think fast internet, and then they sign up, and they find they're getting slower speeds than they were before. We were told it would be so fast it would shock us. It has shocked us, but not because it's fast. Mr Strong also said members had reported problems with dropouts and patchy service. And then you can take, Mr Deputy Speaker, the fact that the New South Wales Business Chamber reported that 43% of the 850 businesses it surveyed said they were either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the NBN. And this is from a government who purports to be the champions of small businesses. This survey from the New South Business Chamber reported it's costing small businesses an average of $9,000 through delays, disruptions and loss of sales. And you don't have to look very far. Even in the last few days, an article in the Newcastle Herald noting that the owner of a Newcastle post office has been without phone and internet for 9 days and is out of pocket thousands of dollars and is sick of waiting. This Australia Post Edgeworth owner, Paul Roddenby, said his connection was fine until an NBN technician visited on October the 5th. I quote, "He did something, then he said he'd be back in 5 minutes, and he never came back, and it hasn't worked since." Since then, the Australia Post outlet has had no phone, no internet and no answers. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, you don't have to look very far for the lived experiences and the frustrations of the consumers of Australia with this government's inferior copper-based network. TIO complaints about faults on the NBN jumping by 147.8%, complaints about slow internet speeds soaring by 48%, and fibre to the node remains a key source of dissatisfaction. You only have to look at the top 10 postcodes for complaints about the NBN, and what a surprise, 7 of them are fibre to the node areas. Fibre to the node areas. So, and even NBN's own study, NBN itself, its own survey data shows that consumers rate the copper NBN below every other technology at only 41% advocacy. 41% advocacy. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, we've even had the NBN CEO forced to concede that this government's 30-year business case actually doesn't set aside any funding to upgrade the copper network, meaning the current business case assumes Australians are going to be stuck on copper until 2040. 2040, Mr Deputy Speaker. And on top of this, we've seen nearly a 10-fold increase in Australians seeking to pay themselves to switch their NBN connection from copper to fibre. And here we have the Prime Minister, before the 2013 election, promising that individuals would have the option of paying somewhere between $2,250 to $3,000 to switch from copper to fibre. But NBN has revealed the average quoted cost to date has in fact been $15,800. $15,800 greater than what the Prime Minister promised. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, you don't need to take it from me. You don't need to take it from me. In fact, even the government's own MPs are criticising it. The member for Mallee bemoans the rollout of faceless NBN. And I quote from The Guardian. The Mallee MP said he had seen problems with the rollout firsthand as his constituents struggled to make their services work, and he had been forced to dedicate one of his electoral officers to dealing with the complaints. So at least there's a dose of reality, and from at least one member on that side of the chamber, Mr Deputy Speaker. So when it comes to copper or coal, you hear this Prime Minister talk about engineering and economics. You know it's a farce. You know he has failed. You know that this copper NBN is letting down Australians.
Time has expired. I call the Minister for Urban Infrastructure.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, it takes a certain kind of doctrinaire political commissar-like insistence to roll out this tedious line that we hear from Labor communications spokespersons in the face of the quantitative evidence that the rollout is continuing and the rollout is going well, Mr Deputy Speaker. We had an MPI on the 17th of September 2015 brought by the Labor opposition. There were 1,291,000 premises able to connect at that time. They came back and had another go on the 21st of October 2015, 1,374,000 premises able to connect. 10th of February 2016, 1,719,000 premises able to connect. But, wilfully turning their minds to the evidence, they came back and had another go on the 3rd of May 2016, when there are 2,428,000 premises able to connect. Then, of course, the member for Blaxland was pleased to be relieved of the terrible job of being Labor's shadow communications spokesman, trying to find gloom as the broadband light increasingly shines over the nation, and that job fell to the member for Greenway. On the 11th of October 2016, she rolled out her first matter of public importance debate on the NBN. By that time, the number of premises able to pass had continued to relentlessly increase to 3,207,700 premises. She had another go on the 22nd of November 2016, again wilfully turning her mind to the clear evidence that the rollout is continuing relentlessly and more premises around the country were able to connect. By that point, 3,231,397 premises. And evidently feeling a bit depressed by the evidence that the NBN rollout is continuing remorselessly, she hasn't been back to the well until today, almost a year since the last time she had a go. But the numbers have continued to inexorably increase, and the number of premises now able to connect, Mr Deputy Speaker, 6,188,166 premises. In fact, some 35,000 premises a week are being connected to the NBN. This is a very large-scale rollout. It is a project which is complex, which covers the nation and which is being delivered, notwithstanding the hopeless, chaotic mess that we inherited from the Labor Party when we came to government in 2013. If you are a Labor Shadow Minister for Communications, it seems you come up with your own version of the prayer of St Francis of Assisi. Where there is light, let me find darkness. Where there is hope, let me counsel despair. Where there is sustained and impressive progress on a very large-scale rollout, let me assert chaos continually and in the absence of evidence. Let's have a look in detail at some of the extraordinarily misleading statements consistently made by the Labor Party and by the Shadow Minister. We saw a shining example yesterday, where the Shadow Minister asked a question about a survey by the reputable internet survey company Akamai, which she asserted shows that Australia is behind Kenya. And what was her dazzling piece of logic for making this argument? She said that the almost 2% of people in Kenya, who are able to connect to a broadband network should be compared to the result in Australia in a network which is designed to ubiquitously serve the entire population. What an entirely misleading characterisation of that survey, but sadly entirely consistent with the rhetorical approach we see from the Labor Party, because what they know is that their record on this project, Mr Deputy Speaker, was an embarrassing catalogue of ineptitude. They had 6 years. They had 6 years on this NBN. They wasted nearly 2 years on a plan which they couldn't deliver. They had to ignominiously and embarrassingly walk away from it. They came up with a new plan in April 2009, which supposedly was going to be done in conjunction with the private sector. But that didn't happen, because a year later we discovered that the private sector wasn't interested in participating. And what was the hopeless, pathetic, incompetent record that they left when they scuttled out of government? Barely 50,000 premises around the country able to connect. Barely 50,000 premises after 6 years of government and spending $6 billion. I remind the House, Mr Deputy Speaker, as I've just pointed out, that we are connecting 35,000 a week. 35,000 a week, 50,000 in 6 years. I'd call one record pretty good. I'd call another a catalogue of rank incompetence and ineptitude. And yet, bizarrely, the minister keeps coming up and making some kind of the shadow minister keeps turning up and wanting to debate this issue yet again for reasons that are mystifying. Let's look at the facts about Dobell. We had some questions from the member for Dobell yesterday. She asked about the Rudolf Steiner School in Fountaindale, and I can inform the House that the facts are that there needs to be a fixed-line lead-in so that that school can be connected, and NBN has scheduled a crew to complete that work next month. Let me respond to what she asked about in terms of constituents in Warnervale, in Wairima Road in Warnervale. The infrastructure has been installed in that street. The work is underway to integrate into the NBN core network, and NBN is aiming to make services available to all premises in Wairima Road by December of this year. So these are the facts, Mr Speaker. But let me point out another fact about the electorate of Dobell. Let me point out another fact. Do you know how many premises were connected to the fibre network, to the fixed network in Dobell, when this incompetent rabble left office? Zero. 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 After 4 years, your electorate had 0 people, premises connected to the fixed network. And you know how many premises are able to connect in the electorate of Dobell today? That number is 86,500. 86,500. And of those who are connected, there are 57,898 premises connected. So I say to the member for Dobell, yes, she's identified a couple of instances where people are not connected, and I have just been able to demonstrate when they are going to be connected. But I also say to you that there are 57,898 connected. Let's do a little comparison. One government delivers zero. One government delivers 57,898. And I'd suggest that those from the party that formed the first government are really on a hiding to nothing when they pursue this issue. Now, of course, what is Labor's plan?
Quieten down.
What is Labor's plan to deliver the NBN? Well, that's a very, very good question, because the shadow minister is very, very good at complaining. She does a very poor job of telling Australians what her plan is. But let's have a look at the plan that was put forward by the Labor Party for the 2016 election, because I think that's the best evidence we have of the continued narrative of rank incompetence from these people who have a dismal track record on broadband and no proven capacity to deliver. Because, you know, the previous shadow minister, the member for Blaxland, his promise for the 2016 election was that they were going to connect 2 million more premises to fibre than the coalition was promising, and it was going to cost not $1 more. Not $1 more. It's an economic miracle. That is the kind of thing that Swanee's economic brain might have come up with. And what did the Australian Financial Review have to say about this Ripper plan? They said, quotes, "A lack of considered detail bedevilled the national broadband network under Labor. The fact the party doesn't want to give any details about its new plan, or more accurately a reinstatement of the old NBN, and not talk about the cost, makes this policy look like the last, an expensive joke." Close quotes. That was what the Australian Financial Review had to say, and it was a pretty accurate assessment, because when it comes to delivering a broadband network, this mob on the opposite side of the House have form, and their form is hopeless, rank, embarrassing, chaotic incompetence. Hopeless, rank, chaotic incompetence. That's your track record, and we've seen nothing from the Shadow Minister, and we've seen nothing from the opposition that suggests they're going to be anything else. We are getting on and delivering the national broadband network.
Right. Before I call a member for Whitlam, I'll remind the member for Bruce that he's on my list as being warned during question time, so that carries over. I call a member for Whitlam.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, it takes a certain kind of genius, doesn't it, to spend $50 billion on an infrastructure project which is supposed to improve communications in this country, only to see speeds go down and prices go up. And this is the stuff that these guys over there say is all going very, very well. $50 billion to see speeds go down and prices go up. That's the experience of Australians right around the country. In fact, from Longman to Logan, from Rankin to Capricornia, right around the country, people are saying the very same thing. Do not let these guys near the NBN. They have stuffed up everything they've touched. We had the minister here given 10 minutes to explain how they are going to fix this mess. And what was their killer point? What was their killer point? Labor didn't finish the NBN project on the same day that it started it. We didn't finish it on the same day that we started it. That's their killer point. Well, if that is all they've got to defend themselves, Australia is in a world of pain and trouble. We have got a project that is failing from beginning to end. Connections failing, bad technology, and when somebody raises a problem, and the CEO of the NBN has himself conceded that they stuff it up 1 in 10 times. 1 in 10 times they're stuffing it up. Can you imagine running a hamburger store, Mr Deputy Speaker? Can you imagine running a hamburger store where 1 in 10 customers comes back with food poisoning? You'd be run out of business pretty quickly. But they think, and this government thinks that it's a pretty good idea that if you can stuff it up 1 in 10 times, things are going all right. Well, if you want to see blood drain from opposition, from government members' faces as quick as anything, just look at the look in their faces when the Prime Minister says, "We've got it, it's all going okay." Because they know themselves it's not going okay. They know that there are big problems, businesses losing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I see the member for Capricornia in the chamber today, and I'm glad she is. But perhaps she'll have something to say to defend those small businesses in her electorate which are losing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars because of the failed NBN project in central Queensland. And it doesn't stop in Rockhampton and right throughout central Queensland. Up and down the coast, small businesses and premises are saying the very same thing. They need a champion in seats like that to say they are going to do something about the NBN project, instead of these apologists over here, instead of these apologists who simply haven't got the answer. Well, tomorrow the Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman is going to release a report, and it is not going to be good news for you mob over there. It is not going to be good news for that mob over there, because in the last report we saw there was a 53.6% increase in the complaints about broadband. A 53% increase in the complaints about broadband. I guarantee you the jump tomorrow is going to be even greater than that. And those members opposite might think that that's okay, but I just want to leave you with one fact. The telecommunications industry receives over 112,000 complaints a year. That is four times the number of complaints that the finance and banking industry receives. And you all know what the feeling out there in the electorate is about a Royal Commission into the banking and finance industry. Why do you think the business as usual is going to be okay? because the mob are coming after you. You're doing nothing about it, and they're coming after you. We've got the ideas for reform. We know what we've got to do. This mob over here have got to improve the rollout, ensure that the Australian people are getting the best technology available. And we need a tough cop on the beat to ensure that people aren't involved in the NBN ping-pong that you guys are involved in. Apologising and blaming but not taking responsibility for anything. We need a tough cop on the beat, and we need a set of laws that provide people with the guarantees and the regulations to a decent broadband service, not the outdated system that we have in place at the moment. So I challenge all those members opposite, do the right thing, get behind your own constituencies, demand a decent broadband service for rural and regional Australia and right around the country, instead of apologising for the rank failure that your NBN project has been. We shouldn't be spending $50 billion on this project to see services go backwards.
I call the Assistant Minister to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, look, I thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this matter of public importance. Deputy Speaker, who could forget that famous flight when Senator Conroy and Kevin 707 jetted off into the sunset on the Prime Ministerial jet, and I guess the champagne was flowing and the canapes were being served, and the NBN was being hastily conceived on the back of a beer coaster, Mr Deputy Speaker. The NBN was planned by Senator Conroy and Kevin 707 on the back of a beer coaster. They didn't know how much it would cost. They didn't really know why they were doing it. They didn't know what the outcome would be, but all they wanted was a headline, and a very expensive headline it would be. We had the promise of this mystical network that was going to be unaffordable to Australian telecommunications consumers. We had promise after promise by Labor and a total lack of delivery. Who could forget the trial in Hobart? The towns of Smithton, Midway Point and Scottsdale were going to become economic powerhouses under the supercharging of Kevin's NBN. But it didn't happen, Deputy Speaker. Smithtown, Midway Point, Scottsdale, nice little towns, nice places, but still not supercharged by the NBN. And the NBN under Labor indeed certainly set a record, Deputy Speaker. It set a record by missing every target that it ever set for itself. It missed every single target. And we had a situation where the massive cost of this was going to push up the price of broadband out of the reach of Australian consumers, Deputy Speaker. This government takes a much more realistic approach, Deputy Speaker. We are about delivering a mix of technologies that are appropriate. We are about delivering an appropriate investment that's going to meet this nation's telecommunications needs, that is going to deliver the high-speed broadband that is required, but against the context of budget responsibility. Labor doesn't have any notion of budget responsibility. If Labor's plans were implemented, the cost to consumers would increase by $43 every month, Deputy Speaker. $43 every month. And when you look at the breakup of the customers to the NBN, it's very interesting. Where are most people connecting? Are they taking the high-flying packages? Are they having a cost-doesn't-matter approach to hooking up to the NBN? Deputy Speaker, I can say they are not. Some 28.5% of consumers are on a package that is 12 megabits or less. 55.6% of consumers on a package that's 25 megabits. 4%, only 4% taking a 50 megabit package, and less than 0.01%, Deputy Speaker, less than 0.01% adopting a package over 100 megabits. So we have a situation where 84% of consumers are taking up plans that are 25 megabits or less. Deputy Speaker, under the government's NBN rollout, we are seeing massive improvements in the telecommunications experience for people in regional and rural areas. Those on the fixed wireless network are very happy with the quality of the service that they are achieving. Under the Sky Muster program, we are increasing data limits. We are making it more flexible for those people outside the reach of the fixed line and the wireless footprint, Deputy Speaker. It is all about making an investment that is appropriate. In this House today we have had a lot of discussion on power prices, and one of the key factors that has driven up power prices is an inappropriate investment in the poles and wires, Deputy Speaker, making power unaffordable to so many households. And in exactly the same way, an inappropriate investment in the NBN would have made broadband services unaffordable to Australian households as well, Deputy Speaker. This government is about an appropriate investment, an investment that is absolutely sound from a financial point of view, an investment that will deliver the sort of flexibility that is needed to achieve Australia's broadband needs. We are approaching this in a sensible, well-managed way. Labor missed every target it set for itself. Their rollout was an absolute disaster.
Member's time has expired. The member for Whitland, I think he's had his turn. The member for Dobell.
Deputy Speaker, how many complaints would an electorate office expect to receive about the NBN in 1 year? 100? More. 200? More. 300? More. 400? More. Higher? 450. Upwards of 450 and counting that my office has dealt with in the last 12 months about the NBN. These complaints commonly fall into 4 categories: poor experience getting connected, slow internet speeds, stuck between the retail service provider and NBN, the NBN ping-pong, technology not meeting consumer expectations. I've heard from businesses that estimate losses of tens of thousands of dollars, from families whose children can't finish their homework, from elderly people isolated and at risk without landlines. I've heard from people frustrated by this blame shifting between the NBN and their provider. I couldn't put it better than Neil Keel. This is what he said to me. The NBN, it's total crap. Plain and simple, total crap. The Central Coast is one of the first regions for the full-scale rollout, and there are now 5 technologies in the mix. We are a guinea pig for the NBN, and there are serious problems. Problems with the fibre-to-the-node technology, problems with the government's handling of the rollout. But I have breaking news. Breaking news. Writing to the minister for 12 months, I have my official response here. Official response, I know. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. Very grateful. Very grateful. No, wait for this. That NBN has made terrific progress in serving your community is undeniable. It is undeniable. Terrific progress. Well, I don't know where we stuck up terrific progress with the TIO report. The TIO report, its 2016 annual report, four of the top 10 postcodes for complaints about the NBN across the country were from the Central Coast. Now that is now code for terrific progress. I am going to make a bold prediction today. I am going to make a bold prediction. The next report, which we know is due out tomorrow, will be another damning indictment on the rollout. But I'm keen to hear it described as terrific progress and undeniable. But I did have, and I know with a bit of indulgence, temporary NBN. Terrific progress. Temporary NBN. Thank you for your indulgence. I know this because I hear it every day. In the past month alone, I have heard from, let's hear from Michelle in Fountaindale, let's hear from her, whose NBN service was disconnected following a storm in February, which brought down the overhead lines. She was without a phone line or internet for 8 months. But when the NBN finally came to fix it, they could only offer a temporary solution.
I will warn the member.
Thank you very much.
Indulgence is wearing thin.
You would have seen quickly the cable ties where it was connected to the fence. Or what about Jeffrey from Tacoma, who was switched to an NBN service earlier this year that never worked? Now let's hear the NBN's response. This address was indeed connected to the NBN network in January 2017, but there were numerous service issues, and so following a detailed investigation by NBN, it was deemed that the address is not feasible for NBN service. Accordingly, the address was rolled back in our system as not available for NBN service as of the 30th of May 2017. I don't know if that's code for terrific or if that's just damn fabulous, but NBN have now taken him off the network, and he has a node in front of his house. I don't know, should I go to Henry or should I go to Ken? What about the Steiner School? I was delighted to hear today, and the Shadow Minister has been with me to the Steiner School. They presented at the Joint Standing Committee. We have had commitment after commitment that this school will be connected. But right now, what's ready for service? The cemetery behind the school, and the school can still not connect. The school can still not connect. And I am sure that the residents of Waimea Road in Warnervale will be thrilled with the minister's response. Regarding your constituents in Warnervale, I presume that you were referring to residents in Waimea Road who you made representation to last year. I can advise that the infrastructure has been installed in their street, and work from NBN's core network is underway.
Member's time has expired. I call a member for Bowman.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Speaker. We were enjoying that contribution too, I can assure you, and I could have really enjoyed listening to Ken and Derek. And being a roving complaints bureau, as the opposition is becoming as they travel around the country, scurrying around looking for unhappy people, is one way of surviving through the long and dreary years of opposition, wandering around seat by seat and conducting NBN crisis meetings where you sit there and put on some scones and wait for people to filter in, popping their ALP membership card above their head and sitting in the front row, given a complaint to read out, and then away they go. Well, you know what? We had one of these in my electorate of Bowman where not a single complaint was elucidated for NBN Co. Not a single genuine complaint. Now, I'm not saying there's not genuine complaints. The TEI data is absolutely correct, and we do need to break up these complaints according to the amount of Australia that's connected. And if you're going to double your footprint of NBN, then of course you're going to double your complaints, self-evidently. If you're going to have twice as many people connect to NBN, self-evidently there'll be twice as many complaints. In fact, complaints per population is falling, a very inconvenient truth for the opposition. The other greater concern for our good friends on the other side is that they promised the gold-plated monorail to every home, wasn't it? The super-fast government-run broadband. Everyone got the same colour curtains and the same length, and it was all going to happen the day after they planned it. Well, they got to the end of their 6-year tenure, of course. Just 200,000 houses were NBN ready. That sounds like a pretty significant number. 50,000 had connected after 6 years and multiple failed starts. Now, 50,000 sounds like a great number, Deputy Speaker, and I must say a handsome replacement for your predecessor. Deputy Speaker, there we were, 50,000 divided by 150 electorates. That's only 300 households per federal electorate. Deputy Speaker, it's worth repeating, isn't it? In the limited 5 minutes I've got, the 50,000 who are connected represent only around 300 households per electorate. That's 2 streets. And I'll take that interjection from the other side. No, nothing was done in my electorate of Bowman after 6 years. Zero. And so, with an average of 2 streets connected after 6 years, you need to pick this up and ask yourself, in the counterfactual, had Labor continued with their plan, how many of the complaints you hear today about our NBN would you have heard for Labor's NBN, where only 10,000 dwellings a year were being connected? Now, they might have upped it to 50,000. But the reality is it's not 300,000. So you need to remember that every complaint you have about the Coalition's NBN represents a complaint you'd have had with Labor's NBN, where they basically would drip-feed the nation with fibre to the home with virtually no competition in retail provision. And that's why the very important statistic that if you haven't studied economics, and that's everyone on the other side except one guy who went to ANU and did it through the sociology department, there's no economic training on the other side. What they don't understand is that with competition between 140 providers, you're going to get a drop in price and an increase in data availability. And that drop in price is around $40 a month. That's right, those packages that you see
from Telstra and Optus are about $40 a month cheaper than they would be if you had a government-provided fibre to the home and no competition in the price at which it's provided. I'll take my electorate in Bowman. Sure, we'd all love a faster rollout, but there's really only two potential pathways here. There's either the mixed technology mix that's being used by Scandinavia and most of the developed world outside of city-states, like Singapore, Hong Kong or Seoul, where population density is around 17,000 humans per square kilometre and different forms of economics do stack up. But that's not the case in Australian cities, where Sydney, Melbourne and Canberra and Adelaide are around 1,200 to 2,000 residents per square kilometre. There's simply not enough people paying their internet bills to justify fibre to the premise. In Brisbane, where it's 1,200 per square kilometre, or my mainland electorate of Redlands, where there's only 700 humans per square kilometre, there's simply a lot of money paid in rod and roping and not enough customers to pay for the service. And that's why the very simple premise from the Coalition's approach is we will roll out fibre when it's economically justifiable to do so. And that lies at the heart of Labor's approach. They were going to roll out fibre, but slowly. They're going to roll out fibre, but 6 to 8 years more slowly. And they're going to roll out fibre $20 to $30 billion more than the country had to spend on it. And they can go all around the country collecting complaints, but that brutal reality they cannot escape.
Thank the honourable member for Bowman. I call the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It was going to be a game changer, but now all we have is something that is hurting small businesses, hurting the economy, increasing inequality and continually falling short. We were promised big things, Deputy Speaker, very big things, but it has been the fizzer of all fizzers. And no, I'm not talking about the Prime Minister, I'm talking about the NBN. The government's turning a blind eye to this mess, and my community, for one, is totally over it. My office, like the member for Debelle, has had hundreds of emails and mobile phone calls because businesses and individuals have no internet, no landline, all because of the NBN rollout. And if they live in one of the many areas in the electorate of Macquarie which has poor mobile phone signal, they're calling from the top of their street on tippy toes, hoping to get a bit of signal. Deputy Speaker, the most insulting part of all is the insistence by this Prime Minister that nothing is wrong, the delusion that all is well and that the only shortfall is that NBN Co needs to improve its PR and retailers need to lift their game. He maintains copper is king. In fact, we know copper is second-rate. I can't believe the Prime Minister doesn't know the mess he's created. The Telecommunications Ombudsman clearly knows. It's been a job creator for them. This is the PM for innovation, but he's simply put NBN in the too hard basket, along with renewable energy and the rest of his values. And in the meantime, communities are suffering as they receive an internet service that is often worse than what they already had. Exactly. This experience that I've had in the Blue Mountains part of my electorate is set to be repeated in the Hawkesbury, where densely populated suburbs full of small, medium and large businesses, like in McGrath's Hill, people will have to make do with fibre to the node, long stretches of copper, places where the internet could help bridge the divide in access to mental health services, employment and education. Places like Wilberforce and Freeman's Reach will have to make do with FTTN, and in fact, there is a 1 kilometre stretch in Wilberforce. At one end, they're getting fixed wireless. About halfway along, they're getting fibre to the node. And a few hundred metres down the road, they're getting fibre to the curb. Now, how inequitable is that? This is total digital inequality. It's hard to know where to start when talking about the experience faced by the communities of the Upper Blue Mountains with their rollout of FTTN. But let me share just a few cases with you. There are an endless number of them. Terry lives in Leura in the Blue Mountains. Leura went fibre to the node live in August 2016. Terry's been unable to connect ever since. NBN has identified that there are a number of premises within the FTTN footprint that are unable to receive a connection. Surprise, surprise. They say, we're currently investigating options to deliver an NBN solution for these premises. And although we're committed to delivering a fast broadband service as soon as possible, we can't provide a time frame at this stage. But what we do know is that Lura is going to have its landline switched off in February 2018. No guarantees that these people will even be connected by then. Example 2, Nick lives in Lawson. Lawson went live with fibre to the node in August 2016, and Nick switched over. In February this year, Nick's speeds dropped and he logged a fault with his service provider. In September, I think that's about 7 months later, 8 months later, NBN was saying it was an issue with the service provider, and the service provider was saying it's an NBN issue. This is something we have all heard multiple times. Nick, he was persistent, he kept at it, and NBN has finally determined that it was a problem with the copper in the street. After all, who'd have thought it? And they have brought about the repairs. So finally, Nick's NBN service is working properly again. Tim lives in Wentworth Falls. This story will be familiar. Despite a node being only 75 metres from his property, he can't connect because, according to NBN, the lines are not necessarily direct that Telstra has handed over to them. So it's not in a straight line, and his property cannot be connected to NBN, as NBN has identified a high loss of signal on this specific line due to, guess what? The length of copper. In short, this government has completely blown a chance to make a real difference to the lives of Australians, and they'll go down as the people who took us back to the dark ages.
I thank the honourable member for Macquarie, and I call the honourable member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. One of the great historic, I would say, obligations, burdens or duties of every coalition government that comes to office is to clean up the complete mess that they have been left by the previous Labor government. And just look at a few. Where would we like to start? How about we start on the issue of border protection? Look at the mess, Deputy Speaker, that this coalition government has to clean up of Labor's border protection mess. Hundreds of children locked up in detention camps by the Labor government, let out, Deputy Speaker, by the coalition government. Of course, Deputy Speaker, there's the issue of trade. We saw the mess that the Labor have created, the delays of the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement fixed up and repaired by the coalition. Defence, another policy area of complete and utter disaster from the Labor Party. Again, the coalition government comes in, complete mess, and has to fix it up, Deputy Speaker. And of course, energy costs. What a mess the Labor Party left us, we inherited. Under their governance, Deputy Speaker, 100% increase in electricity prices. In 6 years, under the Labor Party, we saw a 100% increase in electricity prices. And, Deputy Speaker, it is exactly the same with the NBN. Another complete Labor mess that the coalition has to come in and fix up. And what do they contribute? They put their hands up and go, "You haven't fixed it quick enough. You haven't fixed up our mess quick enough. We've created all this mess in every portfolio you can imagine," and their complaint is, "You haven't fixed up our mess fast enough." And let's look at some of the mess they left us with the NBN, Deputy Speaker. But we start with, Deputy Speaker, we know that in 2013 there were only 51,000 premises connected. 51,000, Deputy Speaker. 1 in 50 across the nation. So far, Deputy Speaker, we've got down that to 1 in 2. And then we saw, Deputy Speaker, the complete hopeless budget overruns and time overruns. And who can remember the Labor's NBN promotion that they would do on the internet, and where they'd invite consumers or householders to go on the internet and have a look at the map of where the NBN rollout was. And of course, this map had all the colours would sort of fade away. So when you actually clicked in on the map to try and focus down on your street to see when you would be connected, the map that Labor put up absolutely faded out. So residents had no idea whatsoever. Now we know if we did not fix the mess that the Labor Party left us, people would be waiting another 6 to 8 years. 6 to 8 years additional wait. That is what households in Australia would be waiting for if the coalition did not clean up that Labor mess. And not only the time, Deputy Speaker, It would have costed another $30 billion. The changes that the coalition have had to be forced to make to clean up this mess that Labor have left us on the NBN have saved the Australian nation $30 billion. And 6 to 8 years, Deputy Speaker. This is what we inherit in policy area after policy area after policy area, and the only contribution we can get from the Labor Party is, you didn't fix our mess up quick enough. Well, Deputy Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to give a quick update on my electorate of Hughes, down in the beautiful south of Sydney, to how we're progressing with the NBN rollout. So far, we have 44% of the electorate is connected, and we have, Deputy Speaker, or have passed, and we have 32% of premises that have actually taken up the NBN. So close to 1/3 of the households in my electorate already have the NBN working in their premises. We have another 48% under construction and ready to go, Deputy Speaker, and that will be rolled out, and my electorate will be completed by the middle to the end of next year. Now, there's some suburbs which have waited a long time, Deputy Speaker, for the NBN. Grays Point, we know that will be the 1st of May 2018. We know Hammondville, Pleasure Point, Sandy Point and Voyager Point, areas that have had difficulty with their telecommunications for many years, that we rolled out on the 1st of June 2018. Kirrawee on the 1st of June also 2018. Chipping Norton and Moorebank the same, 1st of June 2018. Bundina and Mainbar down in the National Park, also areas, Deputy Speaker, that have waited a long time for improvements in their communication. We'll have that done next year.
And I call the honourable member for Brand.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I'm very happy for the member for Hume, is it? Or Hughes? For the luck that he has in his community getting, pardon me, the NBN maybe in the next way through halfway through next year, whereas my community has to wait to at least till the end of 2019. But, you know, lucky for some, I suppose. Yeah. The Prime Minister has made many bold statements about the Coalition's NBN, including it's one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in Australia's history. It will be delivered for $29.5 billion and everyone will have access to it by the end of 2016. Of course, it's not the case. Unfortunately, unlike his colleague, the member for Mallee, he has not been bold enough to acknowledge the truth that the NBN rollout has become ridiculous. Like so many of us, the Nationals member for Mallee has to have one of his electorate office staff work nearly full-time, helping talk with constituents and helping them deal with the implementation of the NBN to their home and their business. And the member for Mallee, on this point, he is right. The rollout of the NBN is ridiculous. It's ridiculous because by the end of 2016, more than 7 million premises were still waiting. For the end of 2016, more than 7 million premises were still waiting for access to the NBN. It's ridiculous because this multi-technology NBN mess has suffered a budget blowout of $20 billion. Instead of $29.5 billion on delivery, it's costing nearly $50 billion. And some of that's paying for 15 million metres of copper. I mean, I can hardly believe the things I hear. It's ridiculous because the reality of his corporate turnaround claims is soaring complaints by both customers left languishing and constituents still waiting to be connected. The Prime Minister scrapped Labor's world-class fibre-to-the-premises NBN. It was an innovative infrastructure project and it was a challenging project. This would have delivered the optic fibre technology needed to provide our businesses, our students, our homes, all of us, with the tools necessary to compete in the 21st century global economy. Instead, he has left people with a second-rate NBN. It's a third or a fourth rate, if I'm true. That is, it's slower, it's more expensive, and that's for those lucky enough to even have access to it. Only last month, I held a meeting in Baldive with my colleague, the member for Greenway, the Shadow Minister for Communications. At this meeting, we heard from a room full of local residents about how their lives are being affected by substandard or non-existent internet access. And I can tell you, the local community needed no prompting to let us know the problems they're having with this abysmal NBN. The Prime Minister should acknowledge how frustrated people are in not being able to work, study or communicate effectively thanks to his inferior version of the national broadband network. The stories we heard brought home the impact people living in a communications black hole is having on their lives. We heard how FIFO parents are not able to keep in touch with their children when they are working far away on site. We heard how people have to drive to fast food restaurants to be able to get access to internet to check their emails so children can go online and do their assignments for school. We heard how people who are in a world with internet connectivity should be able to log in and work from home and check their emails on a weekend, but instead they've got to get in their car and drive 45 minutes into the office. It's a disgrace in 2017 in a community only half an hour to 45 minutes from the Perth CBD. But not only this, many people in this community of Baldivis and Port Kennedy and some places in Safety Bay, they also have no mobile phone coverage. They have to leave their home to make phone calls. It's a disgrace. Many people cannot connect to ADSL as there are not enough ports available. And thanks to the delay in this NBN rollout, as I said earlier, to the end of 2019, we don't get the mobile black spot program, thanks very much, and we've never had money in brand. Lucky for you Nationals, they get your pork barrelling money. Well, you do, don't you? So you can just be quiet and take your money while my community has no mobile coverage. So good on you. So no new ports are available. These people don't have the internet, they don't have ADSL, they don't have the NBN, and they don't have mobile phone coverage. It's a disgrace, and I'm really glad one of the Nationals can joke about this. Well, it sounds like you are. But, you know, in my community, this is an important matter. People are disappointed, they're angry. We don't have to stoke their anger at this government and its substandard NBN. And the member for Greenway will back me up on this. We just got to listen to them. And if you could get out in your community, the Prime Minister should come and visit Baldivis. I don't know the last time a Liberal Prime Minister walked down to Rockingham. I've never seen one. I've never heard of one. I barely see a Liberal there. I don't know who's running against me next time, but I don't have much luck. But anyway, come and have a chat and try and fix your NBN.
Order. I thank the honourable member for Brand, and I call the honourable member for Maranoa.
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the theatrics that we see here today are a pathetic attempt to conceal the pathetic plan that we were left when we took government under Labor's plan to create a so-called NBN, a never-never scheme for Australians. It was one of those grandiose plans that Kevin Rudd decided to come up with but had no substance, made up on the back of an envelope. The reality is we are delivering. We are delivering the tools of the 21st century for every community, and particularly in my community of Maranoa, the electorate of Maranoa that takes up 43% of Queensland. We are delivering telecommunications to them in a coordinated and sensible approach. And in fact, it is this government for the first time in this nation's history has appointed for the first time a regional telecommunications minister, for the first time to understand that when we talk about inequality, we are delivering in making sure that we deliver the real outcomes for people in rural and regional Australia. 61% of the NBN has been rolled out across my electorate of Maranoa already. 61%, and through not only fibre to the node, through fixed wireless and through the Sky Muster satellite. We are delivering to households. We are also making sure, for the first time in this nation's history, that we have designated data plans for distance education children. It is abhorrent to think that until this government came into power that we were letting those young children out in outback stations go without the tools they need to get a proper education. We have delivered that because we know what it is to deliver on inequality. We know what it is to make sure, no matter your postcode, you should get a proper education, and we are delivering on that. Couple that with the announcement by Minister Nash only in the last month that we are going to double the data for those people on Sky Muster. This is about allowing them to also trade, to take advantage of those trade agreements that we've put in place as a government. This is something we should be very proud of. And when we talk about, and you want to go and find Ma and Pa Kettle from every community, let me tell you, nearly 14,000 households have been put onto the NBN in Maranoa. We have had 35 inquiries over the last 12 months. That is 0.2% in terms of the complaints that we've had about the NBN. This is a nation-building project, and I grant you there will be some complaints, but when you look at that percentage, you have to strip away that this is nothing more than Labor fallacy, hiding behind the fact that they failed to plan properly. We are delivering. We are delivering for the people of rural and regional Australia. But we're coupling that with a mobile phone black spot program. For the first time in this nation's history, we as an Australian government
have put our hands in the pockets of our government and gone out and invested in telecommunications, particularly in rural and regional Australia, where the commercial tension is not there for telcos to go and build on their own ability. The reality is we've put over 500 towers in and continue to roll these towers out throughout rural and regional Australia in particular, because those are the tools of the 21st century that we need. We need to be able to have mobility in what we are doing in our day-to-day practices, because we are the economic engine room of this nation. The electorate of Maranoa contributes more to the GDP per capita than Townsville, Toowoomba or the Gold Coast. And that's without taking into account the significant energy that's being created in the electorate of Maranoa through the 3 coal-fired power stations. And it's quite interesting on a day of such a momentous occasion where we are tackling energy prices as well, that the matter of public importance is something on the NBN. It goes to show that Labor is bereft of ideas. They are bereft of ideas and policies. They have theatrics, and they'll play behind theatrics and lie to the Australian people. But the reality is we are delivering. We are delivering now on energy policies, but also on telecommunications, to make sure that those tools that we need to be able to take advantage of the trade agreements that we've had is something that this government quite proudly does, because a government's responsibility is to put an environment and the infrastructure around its people. And we've done that. We've done that with the trade agreements and also the small business tax cuts, putting an environment. But the infrastructure is the connectivity that we are undertaking. We are making sure that we are rolling the NBN out on time, not 6 to 8 years later that this mob on the other side would have achieved. The reality is this is real delivery. This is real delivery, making sure that we empower the Australian economy and the Australian people to be their very best. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for Maranoa. The discussion has concluded.